Hey everybody, Chris the old ass retro gamer here. Today I'm going to do an unboxing, which is something I've only done on this channel twice before. But today it's not for a game, it is actually for a console. So why am I buying another console? Because I have plenty already. Up until this point, whenever I capture footage, I've had to use a DVR, and the footage does not come out well. So I've been meaning to get like a high-def capture device, and that's fine and dandy if I want to capture footage from a PS3, PS4, Xbox One, or even a Wii U. But I've always wanted to capture my retro games in HD. Because everyone else seems to be able to do it, why can't I? So I started looking into the Retron 5. And the Retron 5, as we all know, is a emulator console, which actually uses the authentic software, the cartridges for the Nintendo, the Famicom, Super Nintendo, Super Famicom, Genesis, Mega Drive, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance. It has a couple of ports on the sides for the original controllers, which is a nice feature, I must say. And it all outputs through HDMI into HD, and there's filters you can put on to make scan lines and everything. You can just make it look as pretty as possible on your screen. It's all up to you, which makes it very easy to capture footage. But I found a console that comes out of Asia, and currently it's only available, I do believe, through China and PlayAsia.com, that is comparable in every way, but it does more. And what is that? It's the Retro Freak. So what is the Retro Freak? Because when I posted the pictures of this on Facebook when it first arrived, everyone that saw it was like, what is that thing? What? Like I said, it is a Retron 5, but it actually plays on top of all the other consoles that I mentioned before. This one also plays TurboGrafx 16, PC Engine, and Super Graphics. And there's an adapter coming out that will allow you to play Mark III, Sega Master System, and Game Gear games. That's amazeballs. I had to have it. So there's two editions of this. There's the standard and the premium. The standard is the console, and it comes with a controller, and that's it. This is the premium. The premium also comes with an adapter that lets you use all the original controllers for all the consoles that this thing emulates. So I decided, why not shell out a few extra bucks, get the whole shebang. Here's the box. Tells you a little bit about it, where all the plugs are and everything, where you insert all the carts, little picture of the operating system, pictures of all the parts, and even that. It shows you all the different cartridges it can play. Now, if it only did CDs also, like Sega CD and TurboGrafx CD, I'd be happy, happy, happy. So let's crack this thing open and see what's inside. Okay, so there's a couple of pamphlets. It's in some Asian language. I can't tell if it's Japanese or Chinese. I'm assuming it's Japanese. Here's an advertisement, so you could buy the controller adapter if you wanted to separately, if you had bought the standard edition and another controller. And on the back is an ad for the adapter coming out that lets you play the Sega Mark III, Sega Master System, and Game Gear games, which I will probably pick up, even though I don't have any of those games in my collection yet, but can't hurt. This little box had the power plug. There's an HDMI cable. Oh, this is the controller adapter. Has two different sides. One side has Nintendo, which I'm assuming also works for Famicom, Genesis and Mega Drive, TurboGrafx and PC Engine. And on the back it has Super Nintendo and Super Famicom. And I'm assuming this one is for the Super Graphics. And it's all connected through a micro USB port. Fancy. Okay, here is the controller, and from the reviews I read, they say the controller is not all that great, but it's kind of in the shape of a Super Nintendo controller, and I hear the buttons aren't all that great, but it is cabled, it is wired, which is great. I prefer that to the wireless one that came with the Retron 5, because every single person I know that has bought a Retron 5 says that that controller is ass. I'll definitely talk about this in the review. Here's the micro USB plug that goes for the controller adapter. Okay, and I'm assuming here is the console itself. Well, there it is. Not exactly the prettiest thing ever, it's a little boxy, but this thing is tiny. This is smaller than like the Super Nintendo Mini, which is surprising. I didn't think it was this small. What you're looking at here is actually not the console. The console itself is this. This is just so you can plug the cartridges into it. This is the brain of it. The thing about the Retro Freak that also puts it head and shoulders above the Retron 5 is that when you plug a cartridge into it, or a Hue card, it actually downloads the entire game onto this. This is the memory. The Retron 5 does save states. I mean, basically, if the game itself doesn't have like a battery backup, it'll save your place no matter what game it is. This does that also, but it also saves the entire game, which makes it so you can bring your entire collection, to someone else's house. And as long as they have a TV that has an HDMI port, you can plug it in. It has a SD card slot. This is the power plug. And it has 2 USB plugs on the front, which you can plug controllers into. And the controller that comes with the console is a USB controller. But from what I read, it also supports any other USB controller, like from a Wii U or a PlayStation 4, PlayStation 3, which is kind of amazing. This is the console itself. This is just the way to get the games onto this. So, just plugs right back in. And there you go. Here is the Mega Drive and Genesis games. This is for Super Nintendo and Super Famicom. This is for Famicom. Here's where the Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games go in. And here is where the PC Engine, TurboGrafx 16, and Super Graphics games go in. I don't own any Super Graphics games, but I only hear there's maybe like 12 in existence or something, so I don't think I'll be getting any of those anytime soon. But it also has 3 USB ports on the front for controllers, which is awesome. The one downside is that this does not support the NES. I don't know why. It doesn't make any sense to me. That's the most popular console that this thing would be able to play. The Retron 5 does it just fine, but from what I understand, there's an adapter coming out for it, so that's not a big deal. But from what I read also, all you have to do is buy a Famicom to NES adapter, which I did. I found one on eBay for relatively cheap, and it works just fine from everything I've read. So I'm good with that. This is mighty impressive. It is really compact, really small. I like it. It's very lightweight. It's not kooky and crazy, and basically it's just a bunch of add-ons, but I'm cool with that. So let's check this thing out, see how it works. This is the startup for the Retro Freak. Pretty standard. Get to calibrate your screen and agree to a couple of things. But one of the things that I thought was pretty awesome about this console was that off the bat it had an update waiting for me for the cartridge adapter, which was kind of awesome. I didn't have to go online and download anything specific just to get this thing to run. As you can see, this is the operating system. Lots of really cool choices. You can mess with your AV settings, the controllers, download cheats from the web and install them into games. I think you can also install translation patches, which is kind of awesome. You can mess with the internal storage. So let's try some games. Here is Alien 3, which is one of my favorite Genesis games. One of the aspects of this game I like the most is the music, and I was wondering what this would sound like, and it came out sounding fantastic, and the graphics are pretty sharp too. One of the issues I keep on hearing people talking about when it comes to these emulation consoles is that usually the sound comes out kind of funky and distorted. So I wanted to try a game where I loved the music to see how it would sound, and right off the bat came out sounding amazing, so I was not worried from this point on. So I decided next to try a reproduction, and that was Lancer, which is a side-scrolling shooter, as you can see, and it worked flawlessly. I was surprised. I've heard stories that certain reproductions don't work on some of these clone systems, so I was amazed at how clean and crisp this thing looked. Moving on to the Super Nintendo, I wanted to try one of the games that had a specific chipset in it that I hear is not always compatible with some of these consoles, and that was Star Fox, because it has the Super Effects chip, and as you can see, it looks amazing. I decided to try a Super Famicom game also. The only one I own is this Ranma 1/2 fighting game. I think it's called Gekido Hen or something. And here's this character select screen. It worked without a hitch, no problems. As a one-on-one fighting game, it's not too bad. I did not have a problem using the controller that came with the Retro Freak to play this game. Like a lot of people online had said that it was kind of crappy for pretty much everything. But that was not the case. I had no problem pulling off moves in this game. So I also decided to try a reproduction, and this one is King of Demons, and I decided to try one of the filters. I had the scan lines added, and it didn't look too bad, I guess. Here is the game without the scan lines, and oh wow! Pop those zombies' heads off. Yes, please. So moving into TurboGrafx 16, here is my favorite TurboGrafx 16 game. This is Ninja Spirit. Music, graphics, everything clean. The music came through loud and clear. No issues with the controls. Perfectly fine. I decided to give a PC Engine game a shot also, and here is Batman, which is a game we never got here in the States. This is kind of like a puzzle maze game. Pretty fun. It's unique. I didn't expect a Batman game to be like this, but just like every game I've tried so far, worked without a problem. Moving on to Game Boy. This is where things get interesting because of the different filters you can use for the visuals. This gives you the option of using not just a generic, black and white screen for the Game Boy games. You can use the Game Boy Color mode. There's a Super Game Boy mode. It'll automatically detect what games you're using if it has Super Game Boy enhancements. You can change the colors to anything you want. There's all these different filters you can add. It's pretty amazing. So I had it set for standard black and white at first, which is usually how I'm probably going to play these games to begin with. But there is also a mode that lets it play as if you're looking at it through the real Game Boy, where it is that puke green color. I cannot see myself playing games in that style at all, but it's just cool that it's there. And then there's the Game Boy Advance SP mode, which kind of sort of puts the black and white games in color. I probably wouldn't use that much either. And I decided to try another filter just for shits and giggles, and that is this pastel mode, which makes everything real nice and day-glow. Game Boy Color game, I chose Star Wars Episode 1 Racer because I honestly don't have that many Game Boy Color games, but I gotta admit, this looks pretty cool. The colors are vivid and bright. The controller worked perfectly fine. Once again, I don't know what people were complaining about. Even the sound came through really nice for these games, even though the sound is not what Game Boy games are known for. Here is Dark Arena, which is a first-person shooter for the Game Boy Advance, which is pretty awesome, I might admit. And it played like butter on the Retro Freak. So the reason it took me so long to do this review is because the Retro Freak does not play Nintendo games, and I had to order an adapter that goes from Famicom to Nintendo. So here is Super C being played through that adapter without a hitch. Did not cause one single solitary issue. I am using one of the blur filters here that just to make a little more of a smooth image. I'm not a fan of it. I will probably always go with the original super sharp image, which I enjoyed very much. It may look a little choppy, but it was because of the capture device. Whenever I was playing this game through the capture device, it came out looking kind of choppy, but when I rehooked the Retro Freak directly into the TV when I was done recording the footage, it played smooth as hell. So, whatever. Nintendo games worked perfectly fine. I also played a couple of repros, which worked fine as well. So it's been a week and a half since my Retro Freak arrived in the mail, and I have messed with it a whole lot. I was actually supposed to release this video last weekend, but I wanted to hold off until my Famicom to Nintendo adapter showed up so I could try some Nintendo games and some repros that I have to make sure they worked on the system also. As you can tell from the footage I showed, everything works. I did not notice any flaws in the picture. I did not notice any flaws in the audio. Most of the time when I was seeing reviews of the Retron 5, people were complaining that sometimes the music or the sound effects just seemed kind of off on certain games. And, like the emulation just wasn't working correctly. Well, I have had absolutely no problems with the Retro Freak so far. Every game that I've thrown at it has worked flawlessly. Some look better than others. Out of all the games that I filmed, the one that I had the most trouble adapting to in high def was Star Fox. For some reason, just everything being so sharp just kind of threw me off. Don't ask me why. And the funny thing is, I have not had to update the system once. It does not have a Wi-Fi connection, so you have to go online to the Retro Freak website and download patches and install them manually, which I don't have a problem with. But the thing is, I think the version that I got has all of the newest patches already installed, so I didn't have to do anything. It worked right out of the box. The controller itself While a couple of the reviews that I saw before I purchased the Retro Freak said that it was not all that great, that it just felt cheap and the buttons sank into the controller a little too far, that it just didn't feel right. I had absolutely no problems with the controller. While I wouldn't use it all the time, it certainly did not give me any problems because every single game that I recorded for this video, I played with that controller. And while the button layouts were kind of weird for the consoles that only had 2 buttons, like the Nintendo and the TurboGrafx, once I got used to that, it was fine. The D-pad gave me no problems. The shoulder buttons, nothing. It was perfectly fine. Since I do have the controller adapter, I will probably be using that more often than the Retro Freak controller. Like I said, it did not cause any problems. I found it perfectly adequate. So what are my final thoughts on the Retro Freak? This thing is freaking awesome. I highly recommend it. Like I said, every single game that I threw at it, it worked perfectly fine. This thing is mighty impressive. I am so glad that I picked it up. Not only is it a great space saver on my entertainment center, but it makes the games look great. It was like playing most of the games like they were brand new because the picture and the sound came out so crisp and clear. It almost brought a tear to my eye. Even if you don't own all the games you want to be playing, this does have this micro SD card slot so you can play ROMs on it. And it has Game Gear Mark III and Master System support coming soon. There's even talk that there's going to be a couple of patches. You can install like BIOS on here for Sega CD, maybe even the TurboGrafx CD. So if you have ROMs of all the games for those consoles, you might be able to play it on this in the future. Yes. All the yes. Yes for days. Yes, 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 yes. So if you do not already own a Retron 5 and you are looking for an all-in-one console to not only clear up space, but to be able to record games on high-def capture devices, I'm giving a complete recommendation to the Retro Freak. This thing is flawless in my eyes, except for the fact that it does not play Nintendo games out of the box. I had to buy an adapter for that, so that was an extra $20 I had to spend. Outside of that, my final rating of the Retro Freak is a 4.5 out of 5. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, give a thumbs up. And while you're at it, subscribe if you haven't already. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I hope you enjoy yourself. Don't forget to comment below. What are your thoughts of the Retro Freak? Do you own one? And if you do you find it as amazeballs as I do? Because I think this thing is fantastic. Do you have a Retron 5? What are the problems or the benefits of owning a Retron 5 outside of no TurboGrafx support, Game Gear Mark III Master System? If you own a Retron 5, would you consider switching over to a Retro Freak after seeing this video? Let me know. What do you use to capture your footage if you are a YouTube gamer? Do you use high def or do you do the old school way like I did with my DVR? And also, don't forget, share the video on the social media. So until next time, I am Chris, the old-ass retro gamer, signing off. Purchasing this thing might have also had something to do with me getting a high-def capture device.